Hi, I'm Pam Fox, and in today's video I'm going to be answering your questions on the Hiatal Hernia Forum and Help Support Group on Facebook. Remember folks, I am not a doctor. If you'd like to know more about my credentials, I am a certified integrative nutrition health coach, but all of my credentials are listed on the About Me tab at my website, pamfox.org, if you want to learn more about that. So the first question is from Trista Dowd, and she asks, does a hiatal hernia cause pain and tightness in your upper abdomen like it's being squeezed to death? So Trista, I'm wondering if you have not gotten an official diagnosis of a hiatal hernia, and while I don't like to be in the habit of trying to diagnose whether or not someone has a hiatal hernia, your symptoms are very textbook for hiatal hernia. So you're asking about pain and tightness in the upper abdomen. So remember that your diaphragm is a dome that sits underneath your rib cage, and your stomach is supposed to sit right underneath that dome. And so when you have a hiatal hernia, instead your stomach is pushed up into the dome or even through the dome. And so now you have something wrapped around your stomach. So if you're experiencing tightness in your upper abdomen, which is what this is, like it's being squeezed to death, you have to also remember that your stomach does what? It expands every time we eat, right? So now you have an obstruction in your diaphragm, and you have expansion within that obstruction. So yes, you can clearly see how that is squeezing your stomach. Not to mention, you do have an obstruction in your diaphragm, which means the tissues of the diaphragm, your diaphragm moves up and down with every breath, and so you've got an obstruction in it. So there's that friction, that irritation, repetitive, ongoing from breathing, repetitive, ongoing from the stomach, expanding every time you eat. And so you can clearly see how there would begin to be pain, but definitely tightness in that area. So yes, that is a very textbook symptom for hiatal hernia. The next question is from Vicki Lee, and she says, how long do you need to be gluten and dairy free before belching goes away? So Vicki, you mentioned two things. We'll start with, let's start with dairy. So first of all, some people, and in fact there's a comment here from Liz Abbott, she says, dairy free, I was straight away, first day, no belching. Only I have it now if I eat or drink dairy and it's not worth it. So she's saying that she cut out dairy and the belching went away. So when it comes to hiatal hernia, everyone is different. It really just depends. It depends on your hernia, it depends on you, it depends on your life and your circumstances, your habits, it depends on your body. It depends on the age of your hernia and how far up how it's stuck in the diaphragm, how long it's been there. There are so many different contributors that count when it comes to hiatal hernia, and that's why everybody is so different. So yeah, for some people they can just cut out some, dairy or gluten or any other food that's a trigger food, and they feel better. And then for other people that's not the case, and I was one of those. I went on a very healthy diet, and while my symptoms got better, the belching did not go away. In fact, it was the very last thing to go away. I had to actually reverse my hiatal hernia. In other words, I had to get that stomach down and out of that herniated position in order to alleviate my belching, which was chronic. Around the clock, I could not escape it. It was chronic. But once I was able to get that stomach down, oh boy, did I feel and know the relief instantly. And then I went about, healing my diaphragm and strengthening my diaphragm so that herniation wouldn't occur. But when it comes to, I just want to talk a minute about dairy and gluten, because it's important to ask the question why, right? The more we can understand about our condition, the better we are able to then go forth and address our condition. So dairy, when mammals are born, we nurse, right? We are growing at a fast rate, we are developing, we require very specific nutrition, so we drink our mother's milk, right? And our body knows exactly what to do with that milk because it's what we're supposed to be eating, right? And so our body produces the enzymes in order to break down that dairy, the lactase, the enzyme lactase, and lots of it in order to break down that dairy and be able to digest and absorb the nutrients, okay? But as we then grow older and we come into the weaning age, the body produces less and less of that necessary enzyme for the dairy because we've gone past the nursing age and we no longer really are supposed to be drinking as mammals or consuming dairy, right? That's when we're supposed to eat it, is when we're little. So the majority of humanity is actually, you could say, lactose intolerant, but that's not really a thing. It's just normal because we're no longer infants, right? So yes, when it comes to dairy and belching, that can be a really big trigger. You consume the dairy and you begin to belch because the body then is trying to digest and assimilate something that it's not equipped to do. So it sits in the digestive tract for a longer period than it's supposed to, and as it breaks down and ferments, for a lack of a better word, gases then are created, and it causes this bloating. So your question is worded, how long do you need to be gluten and dairy free before the belching goes away? And so I guess the warning I want to give is this isn't something you just want to do until the belching goes away so that you can start consuming the dairy again. Obviously, this needs to be a lifelong change, you know, if you can't deal with the dairy, you need to get it out of the system and you need to stop consuming it altogether. Because if your body is unable to deal with it, then it's just going to continue to injure your digestive tract, create bloating, create inflammation, right? Why do we have inflammation? Well, it's the body's response to injury. It floods that area to hopefully create healing. And so then if you have ongoing long-term inflammation, which oftentimes is the case when it comes to gastric disease, because we continue to eat the foods, so we have that repetition of eating the foods that are causing the injury, and so we have ongoing long-term inflammation, which we need to take seriously. We need to take seriously. So, oftentimes when it comes to gastritis, or let's look at esophagitis, for example. So esophagitis is the inflammation of the esophagus. And it's usually a condition that's brought on by hiatal hernia, right? Because the hiatal hernia is one of the things that can cause that reflux, that acid to rise up into the esophagus and burn the esophagus. So we can begin with a diagnosis of inflammation of the esophagus, and you have to take that inflammation very seriously because it's simply a precursor to advanced disease of the esophagus. So you start with esophagitis, and then you're at higher risk for Barrett's esophagus, which is just a more advanced condition of esophagitis. And then if you have Barrett's esophagus diagnosis, that puts you at very high risk for esophageal cancer. So it's just this, step-by-step thing that you need to address back when you have the initial inflammation, because that long-term chronic inflammation sets you up and puts you at risk for more severe and dangerous disease, right? And esophageal cancer, I just talked about it in a couple of videos that I did ago, has been on the rise in the last 3 decades, something like 6-fold. So it's not something that's getting better in this country, in the US. It's something that's on the rise, it's getting worse. And again, it starts going back to the diet, what we are eating, right? What we are eating. So we've got to go back, and we've got to start by healing the gut first. We've always got to start there. So that's dairy. And then gluten, when it comes to gluten, really grains in general, for some people they have a high sensitivity specifically to gluten. Some people have a difficult time digesting grains in general, beans in general, nuts and seeds, and even vegetables, especially raw, highly fibrous vegetables. And so why is that? So that's the question. So when you hear these things, you always have to ask, well, why is that? So then why would our bodies that are supposed to be designed and developed to eat plant foods that the earth provides, why would our bodies have a difficult time digesting those foods? I explained the dairy, but why plant foods? So typically what happens, and this wasn't my experience when I went on a plant-based diet, but I hear it happen to other people. And what happens is they go from the standard American diet, you know, where they can't remember the last time they ate a vegetable, right? I used to be that person. I was like, when is the last time I had a vegetable? Well, there was some lettuce on that burger. Does that count? They go from the standard American diet, and now they're just flooding the body with all of these plant foods. And so there's this transition that takes place where now they're bloated all the time, or belching all the time, and uncomfortable all the time. And so it's just this transition where the body is now getting used to all of this fiber. And so, you know, that happens to some people. For me, I used to be bloated and all the time. And I've talked about my belching, which didn't go away until I was able to reverse my hiatal hernia, but the bloating did go away simply from going on a plant-based diet. I used to look like I was 8 months pregnant all the time and had to wear the tummy slimmers and all of that, which was very uncomfortable. But just within a couple of days, that bloating went away for me. And then occasionally I would get bloated if I ate a lot of beans. And so there are things that you can do. I mean, you can soak your beans, you can soak your grains, and that's going to make them more easily digestible so that they're already broken down to a degree, and some of the they're broken down to a degree so that they're more easily digestible and they won't create as much bloating or belching. Or you can decrease the amount of grains and beans that you eat when you initially start, and then gradually, you know, do more and more and more. But certainly soaking is a really good tip for that. So I know, Vicki, I'm not really answering your question. You're wanting to know how long, and that's how long before the belching goes away is really, I mean, that can't be answered. I mean, people can tell you their story, and for it looks like Liz, she cut out the dairy and she was fine on day one. I cut out dairy. Actually, dairy was the first thing that I cut out. I first cut out milk for about a year, and the belching didn't improve at all. The bloating improved. And then I went on a whole foods plant-based diet and of course cut out dairy altogether. And the belching still did not go away. And that's because I have a hiatal hernia. And for some people, simply making those dietary changes cause the inflammation to go down, the constipation to go away, and this is enough for that stomach to then just kind of relax and flow back down into its original location. So, but for others who have maybe had a hiatal hernia for a very long time, remember that your hernia, when it's obstructing the diaphragm, it will re-adhere in its new home up there in the diaphragm. It will create new attachments, right? And so for some people, it's going to take an additional support in order to move that stomach down. Okay, it's not just going to move down on its own if it's created attachments up in there. Remember, I talk about the peritoneum. That is the mesentery that keeps all of our organs in their rightful place, and it provides lubricant. So there's not, you know, everything's moving around and shifting all the time. So we don't want all that friction creating injury. But if it's pushed up enough and long enough, it will begin to recreate attachments up here. And so it might take a lot of time, consistency, and patience in order to get that stomach to move down and out. So it's going to be different for everybody in terms of how long. And how do we know that we can move that stomach down? Well, we know because surgeons do it every day, right? Surgeons who perform like a fundoplication, for example, a hiatal hernia surgical repair, they go in surgically, they cut away all of that mesentery, those attachments, they grab the stomach and they pull it out of the diaphragm, right? They unherniate that stomach. And then they need to re-adhere it, right? They need to do a procedure where then it stays down, because they know that if you just pull it down and sew you up and send you on your way, it's going to re-herniate. Whatever pushed it up in the first place is going to push it up again. All of these different forms of intragastric pressure that I talk about, all of the things that we do that push our stomach up on a daily basis, the doctor knows that if they don't sew that stomach down, it's just going to go back up again. So they re-adhere it. So we know the stomach can be moved down. Surgeons do it every day in the operating room. But can it be done? Can I do it by myself? Then becomes the question. Can I move my own stomach down? And the answer is yes, you can, but it requires a commitment. It requires daily practice, 5 to 10 minutes a day. It's no biggie. And it requires healing your gut if that is needed. If you have any diagnosis of any type of gastric condition, you've got to heal that first. Because if you're starting to try to pull that stomach down and it's irritated, inflamed, and if you're still doing things that are pushing it up, you're probably not going to succeed at moving it down, but it can be done. It can be done. Okay, Vicki, I hope that kind of answers your question. So my suggestion would be to go dairy-free and to go gluten-free. But also, Vicki, especially if you have any type of gastric diagnosis, IBS, IBD, Crohn's, H. pylori infection, gastritis, esophagitis, anything like that, that you focus on healing the gut first. And that means really clean up your diet with a whole foods, plant-based diet, soak your beans and seeds, drink lots of water, eat lots of fruit, lots of tender leafy greens, cook your vegetables, but stay away from meat, dairy, and eggs, highly processed foods, junk foods, and even stay away from gluten. And then you can reintroduce it later after you've healed and see how you do. And if the bloating comes back and the belching comes back, then you know that maybe there's still a little bit of healing that needs to take place, or maybe you just have an insensitivity, and maybe you always will. All right, so let's move on to Archaga Denise asks, hello, what do you think caused your hiatal hernia? Mine is heavy lifting and straining. How do I lift my daughter without straining my abdominal muscle? Okay, so yes, so heavy lifting and straining can contribute to or cause a hiatal hernia. And so I didn't have a hiatal hernia when my children were young, and so I can only imagine what a nuisance that would be to not be able to freely just scoop up your child without creating more pain and discomfort from your condition. And so what I would like to do is to be able to offer suggestions and tips on how you can more easily do lifting without irritating your hernia. But to be honest, that is tricky. There are things that you can do. You know, when you go to pick up your child, you can pull them close to you when you're in a squatted position, and use your legs and leverage or momentum to stand up, okay, so that you're not contracting those abdominal muscles in order to lift. Because it's the straining or the contraction of those abdominal muscles that pushes your stomach up. Okay, and so every time we push our stomach up, that just promotes and supports that hernia. And so what we want to do is to find new ways and habits that will move the stomach down. Okay, and so avoiding heavy lifting is going to be one of those, or figuring out a way to lift that's not going to irritate your hernia. But the even better suggestion is to, again, go back. We always want to address the root, right? We always want to... Hi Tara, if I have time, I will get to your question. We always want to get to the root of the cause. If we're truly wanting effective and actual healing, right? If we want to fix something and not just manage it or alleviate the symptoms a little bit, right? I mean, there's nothing wrong with alleviating your symptoms in the meantime if you're working on truly healing something, because we want to get relief. But we want to go back to the root. And so again, healing your gut is number one for reversing a hiatal hernia. And number two is moving it down, moving your stomach down and getting it unherniated. And number three is strengthening that dome, that diaphragm, right? Because your hiatus is the hole in the diaphragm where the esophagus comes through, and it's where your stomach herniates through. So if we can tighten that hole through very specific and unique exercises that support strengthening the diaphragm while the stomach moves down, okay? We don't want to strengthen the diaphragm while the stomach moves up, which is what conventional diaphragmatic breathing, you know, those exercises that singers do. That strengthens the diaphragm while pushing the stomach up. We don't want to do that. But if you can do those three things, heal the gut, move the stomach down, and tighten your hiatus, you will have effectively and truly fixed your hiatal hernia. So that you can say, I no longer have a hiatal hernia, which means you'll no longer have the symptoms, which means you'll be able to pick up your child. And this isn't about, just doing all of these things to fix your hiatal hernia and then going back and doing all the things you did before that created the hiatal hernia. It's really a lifestyle change, and it's not a hard one, and it's not a sacrificial one. It's a lifestyle change that just promotes general well-being and health in general. It's a lifestyle change that's going to make you a healthier person, especially when we're talking about eating a healthier diet. That's going to help you prevent disease in the future. So it's going to make you a better mother, a mother that's hopefully going to live longer, those kinds of things. So making these lifestyle changes, we have to be very careful to have the right mindset, to be like, yeah, I can do that. I can do that. That's doable. Or even, that's a good thing. That's a good thing for my hernia, and it's a good thing for me, and it's a good thing for the people that I love, because it's going to make me a healthier, more energetic, more happy person. And that's what a good diet did for me, and it's what it's doing for others. Denise, yeah, there are many. In my course, I list 18 different reasons or things that contribute, exacerbate a hiatal hernia, and 14 out of those are things that we control. And I did a video about that. But we really have to identify those things that we're doing every day that cause that repetitive pressure that pushes your stomach up. Okay, so that we can heal our hiatal hernia. All right? Heal our hiatal hernia, heal our diaphragm, so that we can do things like this without thinking about it. All right, thank you for your question. So the next question is from Tuan Chow Win, and he says, can you actually feel a hiatal hernia if it's big enough? I have been feeling a tightness sensation around my lower left rib for a few weeks now. So again, Tuan, it sounds like you haven't had an official diagnosis of a hiatal hernia. So I'm not saying that you have one. I'm not in the habit of diagnosing, but your symptoms again are textbook. So can you feel a hiatal hernia if it's big enough? So first of all, I want to make sure I understand your question. And the answer is oftentimes yes. Many people can feel their hiatal hernias within them. And then oftentimes people can feel it, but they haven't been able to make the connection that that's what that feeling is. So they might have a pain or discomfort at the herniated site, but they haven't really made the connection that that's why it hurts. So remember, when your stomach herniates into your diaphragm, you have an obstruction in your diaphragm. So the tissues of your diaphragm are irritated and inflamed, the tissues of your stomach are irritated and inflamed. And so it makes perfect sense that you would have, that you'd be able to feel it, that you would have tightness there, and that you could even have pain there. And again, that's not the case for everyone. Everyone's different. You might also be asking, can you actually feel, can you feel a hiatal hernia, like from the exterior? And the answer to that is sometimes yes. I mean, I've seen actual pictures of people with hiatal hernia where you can not only feel it, but you can see it bulging right through the skin, a big lump there. So that's going to be different. I was never able to visibly see mine or feel it, from the exterior, but I felt the symptoms. I felt the symptoms. So yeah, you can feel it. That is a possibility. And then you're saying you're having a tightness sensation around your lower left rib. And yeah, that's typically where a hiatal hernia occurs, is right under the lower left rib. And that tightness, I talked about that when I answered the first question, can be from the obstruction in the diaphragm. It can be the tightness wrapped around your stomach. It could be the pressure that's being created in your chest cavity. There's a lot of different pressures that are occurring with a hiatal hernia. It is the pressures of the hiatal hernia that create the symptoms, the discomfort, the pain that we have. That's why the answer is always reverse your hiatal hernia. Because if you can get that stomach down and then keep it down, reverse your hiatal hernia, then you eliminate all of those pressures that are creating your symptoms. Okay? So that's the answer. That's always my answer when people have questions. What do I do about this and that and that? I'm not in the business of helping you get relief from specific symptoms. Although if I have tips and suggestions, I will give them. But my best advice to anyone with a hiatal hernia is address the hiatal hernia. Okay, Tara, it is common for a hiatal hernia to push on things, causing weird pains that shoot through to the back and into the upper arms. This is what happens to me often. I've gone to the ER a few times. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Thinking I'm having heart issues, which I wasn't. And yes, Tara, this is actually super common, where people end up in the ER thinking they're having very obvious heart issues, heart attack. They run all the tests on your heart and they tell you your heart's fine. This happens a lot. So one of the things that I was just talking about, intragastric pressure, and how our symptoms are a result of these pressures that are created by the hiatal hernia. So we do remember we have nerves. I talk a lot particularly about the vagus nerve, but there are other nerves as well. So as you come down the esophagus and then into the stomach, we have the vagus nerve. And so if you can imagine your stomach now being pushed up against your diaphragm, twisted up against your diaphragm, folded up against your diaphragm, or being squeezed by your diaphragm because you have a full-on hiatal hernia, and all of that pressure is putting pressure on a particular nerve, your vagus nerve, for example, then that can create a variety of issues that can be very mysterious. When we go into the doctor, they can run, the tests that they know how to run and still not be able to figure out what's wrong with us because everything seems to be working fine. So my best answer to you, and I'm trying to tell you why you're having these pains, is because of the pressure that the hiatal hernia puts on the nerves. So again, the focus needs to be on reversing the hiatal hernia. So Pamela says, the doctor said my stomach was switched. This is the last question. I got to get going. And my hiatal hernia is huge. Okay, so twisted. Hiatal hernia is twisted and your hiatal hernia is huge. Okay, and that I need surgery because of that. I have pain after eating small amounts. Can your program work for me, or am I in danger if I don't get surgery? Well, I would love to be able to help you, Pamela, and answer that question, but your doctor knows you best. So my best suggestion is to really work with your doctor. Ask a lot of questions. You could certainly try the natural method. Ask your doctor if he can give you a week or a month to try a natural method and just see how it goes. But if your doctor says, maybe you're in a situation where surgery he feels is the only option. Maybe your doctor feels that surgery is urgent. I don't know your condition. So there is a time and a place for surgery. And while it is risky and we should avoid it if we can, there is a time and a place for it, which is unfortunate. But at some point, a hiatal hernia can get to a point where, like you say, yours is very large. Maybe a large portion of your stomach is way up in the chest cavity, which does make it harder to move it back through that hole into your stomach, But you have to remember that your stomach, even if it is in your chest cavity, it is still attached to your intestines, which means there is something to grab onto and begin to move that down. It is much harder. You need to make sure that you're doing it on an empty stomach. You don't want to try to be pulling a full stomach through a hiatus. And then if you have a large hiatal hernia, that probably means you have a large hiatus, which means it takes longer to strengthen the diaphragm. If you've got a super dilated muscle, it's going to take more patience and time in order to strengthen it. And it may never fully tighten back if it's very, very dilated. And again, I don't know the specifics of your condition. So I really don't know the answer. I wish I could help you more, Pamela. You have pain after even eating small amounts. Yeah, so you can try, you can try, probably already doing this, but make sure you can try blending your food. You're having that pain because that stomach, that food is going into the stomach up here in your chest cavity, which there's going to be a lot of pressure anyway in that area because the stomach's not supposed to be up there. So now you're getting pressure on your lungs and your heart and so forth. So that can cause pain. And then that food has to make its way, from the stomach. It's like an hourglass. It's got to go in like this and then down into the abdominal cavity. So blending your food is going to make that a lot easier for your body to digest and get it through that hiatus. So Pamela, I wish you luck. I really do. I wish I could be more helpful, but work with your doctor and see if they think you can take, a month to try a natural method. And if they say, no, you really, you may be strangulated, like your stomach, there might be so much inflammation there that it's strangulated and they may need to get in there right away. So work with your doctor on that. You're welcome, Tara. You're welcome, Pamela. Lori Ann Kelly says, I've been doing your program and it has helped a lot. Thank you. Look forward to your next talk on Facebook. Thanks, Pam. Oh, you're welcome, Lori. Thanks for that comment. I always appreciate positive feedback. A lot of you guys reverse your hiatal hernias and then I never hear from you again because you're no longer symptomatic and then you're off and living your life, which is great. So I appreciate those comments. Keep them coming. It keeps me going. All right, I will answer this one last question and then I have to go. Nancy asks, I have a constant shortness of breath due to a pressure in my esophagus and stomach. What do you think could be causing it? Well, Nancy, again, this is textbook for hiatal hernia. The shortness of breath, again, your diaphragm has to move up and down and it likes to go through a full range of motion, but if you've got something obstructed in it, it has a difficult time doing that. That's number one. And your diaphragm can get very irritated and essentially injured from that repetitive, irritation. Number two is with the hiatal hernia, the stomach is up in the chest cavity, which means now the lungs, which expand, and deflate with every breath, have something pushing on them as well. And so it makes it difficult for you to get a full breath if something's pushing on the lungs, and they can't fully expand. So shortness of breath is a very common symptom when it comes to hiatal hernia. So the answer then is to, again, reverse the hiatal hernia. Focus on that, starting with healing the gut. Thank you, Tara. I appreciate that. Okay, cool. I didn't know you were one of my students, so that's good. All right, we'll keep working at it, Tara. I hope that you say it's helped a lot. I hope that you will get a full and complete recovery in time. So keep at it and don't give up. All right, so that's it for today. Thank you everyone so much for joining me and for engaging with me. I enjoy it when you guys ask questions, and I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.